Hi everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Mishpatim. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about the special maftir. This week is Shabbos Parsha Shkolim. The Jewish people give a half shekel. This silver, this coinage which is given, is then used to invest in the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And the fulfillment of this mitzvah subsequently is used to create the Beis HaMikdash. So this Shabbos is a very celebratory Shabbos. It happens at the beginning of Adar. And it happens at the beginning of Adar for a very important reason. This is the first of four special parshios, four special passages that we read between now and Pesach. And it happens sometimes on Rosh Chodesh, as it does this year, making it extra special. And what's fascinating is that we learn so many different messages and insights from this mitzvah, from reading about this mitzvah. And one aspect is that Moshe is instructed, we're told, with regards to commanding this mitzvah, that he's not allowed to count the Jewish people. You can't go ahead, point your finger, and say 1, 2, 3. The Jewish people can't be quantified. They can't be limited in that way by being just a number. There is a violation of counting Jews in any context. And so we count the contributions. We see how everyone's contributions comes together. That's the mitzvah of Shkolim. And the fact that everyone has to give the same amount, it's a very important part of this mitzvah. So I'd like us all to focus on these words. The wealthy and the poor, it says. The wealthy cannot increase, even though they're capable of. The poor cannot decrease, and the half shekel has to be given to the Almighty, and it says it's connected to an atonement, to getting, in a sense, forgiven in a very significant way, in a very substantive way. And of course, the Mishkan was, and this whole practice was related to the great error, the national mistake that was the golden calf. But for all time now, we see that the giving of the half shekel is providing atonement for other violations, other sins. Now, to a great extent, the golden calf, the Egel Hazav, is representative or symbolic, or was the beginning of mistakes that have been made ever since. It is the ultimate moment when pardoning, the idea of pardoning, was something which entered our, not just our history, but part of our identity, the ability or the power of the Almighty to forgive the Jewish people and to let us continue on in our mission. So this is known, of course, as kapara, as atonement, and there's a connection because Yom Kippur is related to the word Purim. That's what our tradition teaches us. And there's a connection between Yom Kippur and Purim. I think the best way of looking at it is from a passage in the Gemara in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah tells us the name of Reish Lakish. He says, look at Megillus Esther, and we're all getting excited and getting ready for Megillus Esther. He says, look in the third parak. You'll see that Haman was ready to invest his entire life savings, 10,000 talents of silver, an enormous sum of money. For what? For the purpose of eradicating the Jewish people. That's what he wanted to give his wealth to. And so the Almighty readied an antidote, if you will. The Jewish people must be willing to sacrifice and to give, and to be able to give their silver. and their coinage, their currency, towards the preservation, towards the continuity of the Jewish people. That's what Reish Lakish says. That's what the Gemara says in Megillah. So when we ask ourselves the question, why is it that the wealthy person can't give more? Why is it that the poor person can't give less? We'll all even out, because it's not about the material giving. Of course, that's important. They utilize that to take care of all the needs, of all the purchases and everything for the Beis HaMikdash, for sure. But this specific category of giving is something different. We all have to be on the same level, because our material is not who we are. Our materials are not our worth. Our materials are representing, in this case, if we all give the same amount, then if we are seen as being unified, as not trying to be better than the next person and combining our energies together, then we can be successful. Regardless of how much money is given, imagine if people said, oh, I'm going to give so much because this way I'll get even more atonement. Oh, you can't give this much, so you can't get this level of atonement, this level of spiritual well-being. You can imagine the arguments that would happen. It's also just not true. It's that whether a person's wealthy, whether a person's destitute, regardless of the specifics, that has nothing to do with their spiritual value. And so all of us are giving the same amount, and we're relying on one another in terms of our spiritual qualities to come together. It's very similar to a base tefillah, to a house of prayer. Come to shul, we're relying on that person's merits and that person's merit. If a person is detached, if they're not giving the half shekel, if they're not willing to participate in the community, then they get judged and looked at independently. So the Almighty is looking at us now in Adar before Purim. Are you willing to give and sacrifice the way Haman was, and then be worthy of being protected against his investment in your destruction? Very difficult and timely topic for these days, for sure. But it's important that we realize that there's a certain ideology. It's not that the more money you give, the more atonement you have. Machatzis shekel, and what we have today, Zeichel Machatzis shekel, when we read about this great mitzvah and how we hope to be able to do it again with the Beis HaMikdash, hopefully that stirs us up. Hopefully that gets us inspired, gets us motivated to understand how we are meaningful to each other. We're connected to each other. We're equal to each other. We come together in order to make an impact, and we're interested in this atonement. We ready ourselves to make sure that the Hamans of the world cannot hold anything over us, because the Almighty realizes that we're willing to invest in ourselves. That's the beauty of the importance of Machatzis shekel. This is why we start off Adar with this very important Parsha Shkalim, this special passage that we read in Maftir, and hopefully in the accompanying Haftorah. Hopefully these messages get internalized so that we can together collectively, as a congregation, as a community, and even more broadly, be able to get the most out of our other experience during these unusual times. Thank you. Have a great Shabbos.